Good morning, Hacksters! Today we're interviewing Sophy Wong, who is an awesome designer, maker, and writer extraordinaire. What's up, Sophy? What do you do and how are you doing?
Doing good. Pretty busy. I'm getting ready for Maker Faire next month, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah!
And a lot of stuff at the beginning of the year, so I'm going to bring some of that stuff with me. So I'll be walking around the fair with my crazy space helmet and.
Yeah, those things that you made. So you say space helmet, and I see behind you this amazing, like, blue and gray and black contraption. What's the deal with the space stuff?
Yeah, so it kind of like was an idea that started as a tiny idea that like ballooned into all huge project,
What
which
was
is
the
kind of how
seed?
all my projects go.
Yeah.
The seed was I wanted to, it's kind of like two things came together. Like I always wanted to have my own kind of like fantasy sci-fi spacesuit. Like every time I watch like Aliens or The Expanse, I'm always like, oh, I wish I could be in one of those. Like cool. I just want to see myself with the light on inside. Like so it
Yeah.
was like a small little like vision of what I wanted. And then the super tiny seed that actually made me start doing it was I wanted to write an article about how to put lights inside a helmet. I
Oh,
was like, I'm
yeah.
going to start with one little part of that vision, and maybe it's just like putting the lights in it. So I started with that, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to take a shortcut and like not build the helmet from scratch, which always ends up being like, I think it's going to be a shortcut, but it's
Yeah.
actually just like I'm tricking myself into doing a lot of work.
You think it's more work to modify an existing helmet than it would have been to make your own?
It's a super interesting question because I think for me, it turned out to not be less work. Like, I think I
Hmm.
did the same amount of work I would have done, but I was able
Because you
to,
added on all these like foam bits and like 3D printed parts and stuff, right?
yeah, I did a lot of foam. I've cut a lot of foam on my laser cutter. So that was another like shortcut.
Uh-huh.
Because I was taking these shortcuts, like starting with a helmet that already existed and using a laser cutter, which is super fast to cut out, I could get more elaborate with the
Ooh,
design.
yeah.
So then I ended up like putting in probably the same amount of time, that I would have put into it if I built the whole thing from scratch. I mean, it did take me quite a while to put it all together and paint it and design it. And I spent many hours in Illustrator, like actually designing all the pieces so that they could get cut.
Mm-hmm.
So it ended up still being a lot of work, but somehow it felt like I could get through it because I had that jump start. So that's kind of what I want to talk about at Maker Faire, which is like shortcuts. Maybe you think are shortcuts, but
Ooh.
it can actually just be like your momentum starter for putting in the same amount of work that you thought was too much.
Yeah, and you have two talks coming up at Maker Faire, right?
Yeah, so I'm doing that one about it's called Big Dreams and Shortcuts, and that's
Ha
just
ha ha.
me talking about like how I actually do these things. And then I'm doing another talk that I'm super excited about. That's gonna be me and Jen Schachter from Tested,
Uh-huh.
and Stephanie Explains It All.
Yes, we love Stephanie.
They're both so amazing. And so the three of us are going to talk together about design and making and how we do these things. And we're going to like share our processes. And I think it'll be interesting to see how, like, where our processes are similar and where they're different and like share our backgrounds. So I'm super excited
Yeah.
about that one.
Speaking of your background, so you use laser cutting, you use this foam cutting, you do painting, you do sewing, like you sewed this entire spacesuit yourself. And so how did you learn all of this? How do you train
Well,
yourself?
it's been a long journey. My actual like school background is I've trained in graphic design. So I studied
Oh.
design in college, and the thing about design is it's a technique. It's like a framework. It's not actually a medium. So you can apply design to other media, like whether it's painting or something printed or sculpting. It all, to me, is all like ways of applying design.
Mm.
So while I was studying design, I just took all kinds of classes, like whatever art class I could get into, I took it. So I took photography and
Mm.
ceramics and sculpture and new media and like all these different kinds of things. And then when I got out of school, I just kept like tinkering with things. So sewing, I was like making my own bags, I was making pillows, I was just like sewing stuff and then trying to get rid of everything that I made, you know?
Uh-huh.
And then I eventually started making clothes and selling the clothes that I was making. And then I was really interested in costuming because I wanted to design and I wanted to sew things, but I didn't want to I didn't want to do production. Like I didn't want to sew 50 of something or 10 of something or even like two,
Yeah.
you know, I would
I think
get,
a lot of makers are like that.
oh, I just dread it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do costuming because I figured, you know, it's a one-off thing, or
Yeah.
like, you know, maybe you make 20, but it's for this one show.
Mm.
So I really got interested in costuming and then cosplay. And so it's just been, I just kind of follow whatever I get into, and I just buy all the tools, you know?
And was that your entry into electronics as well?
Yeah, so electronics is interesting because I never thought that I could do electronics.
Uh,
Um,
sure
I
showed yourself.
I'm totally surprised myself. But I didn't know it was really possible to like get my hands on things that could teach me how to do electronics until I
Yeah.
saw it was the first season of Project Runway, and
Oh,
yeah, it was Diana Ing.
cool.
Oh my gosh, I saw her on the show and I was like, what? How is she putting like a heart rate monitor and a camera in a hoodie? Like, how is that even possible? Like, I had never seen that before. That was like my entry into sewable electronics. And so I just started buying books and tinkering, and like that showed me that that was possible. And I had no idea, you know, up until then.
Cool. And you mentioned laser cutting. So what laser cutter do you use?
So I have the Glowforge, and
Oh yeah.
I just have the basic
Uh-huh.
Glowforge.
We have
And
the same.
oh yay! Yeah, I love it. And before we did the crowdfunding, like we opted in
Oh
way at the
yeah.
beginning before it was even out, and we knew we were gonna get this thing. So before it came, we went to a makerspace and we just got on their laser cutter, and we just wanted to learn like how it even works. Like, how do you prepare a file? What do you run into when you try to laser cut things? What are the issues that come up, and what materials can you use? So I think using, and it was an epilogue, I think, that we were using at the makerspace first.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually so helpful for preparing us for when our laser cutter came. Like, I kind of
Uh-huh.
think if that laser cutter, if the Glowforge had come and we didn't have any prior like experience or didn't have anyone to kind of show us how it works on another machine that kind of holds your hand less, I would have been a bit more lost, you know, like whenever I hit a snag on the Glowforge, like I feel like I can work it out now, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I also sort of grew into electronics through the makerspace system or
Yeah.
movement, I guess. And it was a huge part of my development as being able to build electronics, do laser cutting, etc. So cool.
Yeah, like just to have other people going through learning around you and like seeing what other people are doing with the same tools, it's so,
Yeah.
so helpful. Like I always think like it's not good. It's definitely not good for me to be working in a vacuum, like
Yeah.
designing things by myself with no input from anyone
I
else.
used to think that was the good thing, like to like do your own thing, right? But it's
Yeah, there's a balance. Like I
yeah.
feel now that I need to, like, whatever, I kind of am riding my cycles, you know, like sometimes I feel like I need to kind of cut myself off, like close my laptop, put my phone away, and just like focus, you know, to
Uh-huh.
like turn off the external stimuli. And then other times I feel like I need input from the outside world. So then I'm like, I need to get on my computer, I need to watch movies, I need to talk to people, and like, you know, expose myself to other influences and like, you know, let that stuff come to me. But it's like it's not all one or the other. Like I
That's
definitely
true. Yeah, a lot of it is like I've been having these late nights in the office, sort of rebuilding my robot, and like that part is definitely sort of heads down, but then so much comes from talking about it with other people.
Yeah, it's good to have
Yeah.
both of those phases.
And you talked about Project Runway a second ago, and you've also been on TV. You were doing this Mythbusters Jr. thing. Like, tell me about that. What did you bring to it, and what do you feel like you got out of it, and what is so exciting about it?
Oh my gosh, I got so much out of it. It was incredible. I really was in the background. I was just helping as kind of like a safety officer, and if any of the juniors were using tools that they were unfamiliar with, or they just wanted a little like brush up lesson on, I was there to help them
So
with
cool.
that. But just watching that whole thing happen was so inspiring, and meeting everyone who worked on it, and oh my gosh, the kids, they are just so cool and so inspiring and like so smart. I was
The kids
blown
are
away
all right.
by all of them. But then they're also just like really cool kids. Like a lot of the time we would just kind of hang out and like talk about Star Wars. And I was just like so happy, you know? And then I got to see Adam Savage like working. Like,
Uh-huh.
I mean, he's so inspiring just to, like talk to and learn from, but also just to see him in that mode of like
Mm.
of work, I feel like was something that not a lot of people get to see because, you know, it's that's
It's
behind.
not like the fun and games on screen part of it.
Right, right. And he's so kind and so like together. I was just really inspired to watch him like move through this like amazing, like this huge project. Like this project was massive, and the things that we were doing, I mean, were crazy. Like we were blowing stuff up at the box, you know? And he just has this level of experience and this calmness that was just like, it was just like a beacon like leading us through it, and
Mm.
it was really cool. And then everyone who worked on it, like most of the people who worked on the show had worked on Mythbusters as well, so I got to watch this like, you know, almost like reunion of people, you know,
Aw.
like they would share stories about Mythbusters, and I'm like, I totally saw that episode, you know. It's just super cool to like be in that world that I watched on TV. Like I got
Yeah.
to stand behind the Mythbusters like blast panels. Like I was just like, this is crazy, you know?
I love how this is the second thing in this interview where you're like, I had this dream or like this thing that I never imagined could be possible, and then I just like made it happen.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The past few years have just been like, I'm not sure. Well, part of me is like, how is this stuff happening? Like even the Hackspace stuff, I said, but the thing is, I say to myself
Uh-huh.
things that I want, like, and this is part of my big dreams idea
Ooh.
is like when I have a big dream, I try to say it out loud to myself.
Mm.
And it's really hard because it's hard to admit to yourself what you want. But
Yeah, because there's that possibility of failure.
yeah, I think it's harder to say it to yourself, like in private. It's almost harder
Yeah.
to say it that way because, I mean, you know, if you're lying, like, you know what you really want.
Yeah.
So if you can say it to yourself, it's just so powerful. So like I said to myself a few years ago, I was like, you know, I would really like to write. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I would really like to write about my
Mm.
projects. And I just kept doing my thing and putting stuff out there, and eventually someone contacted me from Hackspace and was like, "Hey, we're looking for someone to write articles for us." And I was like, "What? How did that like drop into my lap, you know?"
Yes.
And then I think about it and I'm like, well, actually I don't think it dropped into my lap. Like I think I went for that
Yeah.
because
And it's like you didn't have a specific, implementation of that in mind. I think of it a lot as like having a map versus having a compass. Like I sort of head in a direction that I think is like what's fulfilling now and what sort of seems to be good to reach for and goes with the flow. And then like, because if you have a map, then that sort of sets yourself up for, I must achieve this one goal or else, you know,
yep.
I don't get there. But with a compass, it's like you just follow what feels like it's good and natural, and you sort of get there in ways you never expected.
Yeah, I kind of think that's the perfect analogy for how I roll, because sometimes when I have a map and I have a
Uh-huh.
plan, I don't want to do it anymore,
I know.
know
And
where I'm
sometimes
gonna
it feels
go.
so like there's so many parts to this. Like it's gonna take so long.
Yeah, and
Like,
somehow if I just like put my blinders on and I just
uh-huh.
I only look at the one step in front of me, that works so much better,
And you
like.
have these sort of constant reinforcements of like, oh cool, I did this thing. Oh cool, I did this thing, and you're kind of slowly building.
Yep, yep.
That's
Just
so rad.
yeah.
So what kind of stuff have you written for Hackspace?
Oh my gosh. So I've been writing, and it's been an amazing experience for me, but I've been writing articles, like tutorial articles about how to make these wearable tech projects. So it's been great for me because I'm designing the project to be teachable. So I might make choices about the complexity of the project and the components that I'm using, um, so that I can write about it in 6 pages
Right.
and tell a story in a limited amount of photography. And it's really different than writing articles online. Like I also sometimes write guides for Adafruit, which I love doing also. But it's kind of great, like to write online. You can just scroll forever. You can link to things. You can put a ton of photos on there. Um, but in print, you only have a certain amount of space.
Yeah.
And I feel like I like the challenge of that actually, because it gives me constraints, and that's so much easier for me to work through a project if I have constraints. So
Yeah.
I've been doing projects for Hackspace like putting LEDs in shoes but not having any code involved,
Nice.
or 3D printing the like my jacket with the 3D printed fabric on the back,
So
and
cool.
some lights in there. So if I do more complex stuff, then I try to shrink down the focus of the article to just like one aspect of it. If I do something more simple, then I can really dive in. So, and then
Mm.
I've been writing so many articles for them. They put together a whole issue. I mean, it's not an issue, it's kind of like a separate book, but they put together a whole book of just the wearable tech projects. So that's super cool. It's like
Oh,
30
nice.
projects, and they go from like beginner to pretty complicated.
Hmm.
And then there's a bunch of other people's work in there too that's just super inspiring. Like Helen Lee is in there, and Kitty Young is in there, and um, just like a whole bunch of cool stuff. It's like if you get that book and you're at vaguely, oh, this is my cat. My cat just walked by.
What's your cat's name?
Mitty. That's Mitty.
That's great. Oh wait, this is the cat with the skateboard.
She has a skateboard, yeah. So Kim, my husband, is also a maker, and he likes to build like wacky cat projects. So he made her an electric skateboard, and she pulls this little lever on the front of it, and a treat comes out, but it also like spins up the wheels for like a second, so it just
That's
like
great.
shoots the skateboard down. It's so funny.
I remember seeing that as well as like tons of your projects on Instagram as well. What is your handle on there? It's like Eris Delphi?
It used to be Aristelpha, which is my gamer tag, and I was like, that's so confusing.
Oh,
So I switched it. Now it's Sophy Wong Makes.
cool.
Easier to remember.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, okay. I have a question.
Yeah.
On all these space shows, you have the lights inside the helmet, and so you're the perfect person to answer this. um, I always thought that it would be like, if you have a super bright light on one side of like a mirror, right? And then you have it dark on the other side, or like not as bright. Doesn't that mean you can't really see through it? Like, does it restrict your vision?
Yeah, so it's tricky, and it's very environmentally dependent. So
Uh-huh.
if the light is on inside the helmet and it's dark outside,
Yeah.
I can only see a reflection of my face on the inside of the visor.
Uh-huh.
But if there's any light at all, I can see out. So
Right.
when I was doing some photographs in here in this studio, and I turned all the lights off to, make lighting, and I was just like, I can't see out. And I was worried because I wore that to Emerald City Comic Con. I
Hmm.
was worried that I wasn't going to be able to see at Emerald City, but it was so bright in the convention that
Oh
it was
yeah.
fine. It really depends on the outside lighting, but yeah, if it's dark outside, you definitely cannot see out.
I'm really curious. Okay, so you've probably done a bunch of research on helmets. Is that something they have in the actual space helmets, or is that like a cinematic thing they do so you can see the actors' faces?
I think that so I know in the actual spacesuits, I think they have external lighting. They don't
Ah,
light the
that
face.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, my hunch is correct.
Yeah, I think they have a flashlight outside. They have all kinds of stuff like outside the suit. But what's interesting when I was learning about the spacesuit
Uh-huh.
is it's wearable tech. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimate wearable tech, and the constraints that they have are so intensified by it having to be completely sealed and
Yeah.
have this like really specialized technology on board. It's like it's like a one-man spaceship.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is like um, it's the same requirements as wearable tech that we have, like your fitness tracker
Uh-huh.
or a VR headset. The same constraints. It has to be comfortable. It has to not abrade your body.
Yeah.
You're trying to take these rigid electronic like pieces of technology and put them against your fleshy, soft. Like they have an internal full body. I mean, they're basically wearing like layers of fabric between themselves and the actual suit
Yeah.
with padding in specific places so that they don't get bruising or rubbing. And it's just interesting to me that it's the same problem. How do you put a flat, rigid surface that you can mount electronics on
Mm.
next to your human body that has no flat surfaces on it, you know?
One of my favorite anecdotes about that is that when they were designing the original suits, they were like, we have all these constraints. And they ended up getting a proposal from Playtex, the
Yeah,
creators of, yeah, like the Wonder Bra, I think, because it's the same constraints. So they're like, oh, these are made to like compress the body and shape it and support it in the same ways. And so like the fact that these
wearable
like
all day.
lingerie
Yeah.
sewing the spacesuits is so cool.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it just goes to show like every human body has the same need.
Yeah.
You know, we need to breathe, we need to be able to move, we need to be protected.
And this technology has been around just like in a different context. That kind of blending of context is so fascinating to
Yeah, I totally love that.
me. So you got to hang out with Adam Savage and learn a bunch of stuff from him.
Mhm.
B, last year I saw you at Maker Faire talking with Laura Kampf, and I just remembered when you were talking about design that you had this whole sort of mind to mind meld about design and making.
Yeah.
Uh, it was so cool. And I'm wondering if you have an intention to meet anyone else. Is there like who would be your dream person to meet and work with?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. There's so many people
Yeah,
who
right.
oh my gosh. And a lot of them are on YouTube, and I love that they're like putting all their work and their processes
Yeah.
on YouTube. Jen Schachter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we were talking last night, Jen and Stephanie and I, and we were just chatting about how our different work backgrounds really like even though they might seem like they're unrelated to what we're doing now, like
Uh-huh.
they totally help with what we're doing, you know, like whether it's whether you're like waiting tables, or I worked as a receptionist at a salon,
Uh-huh.
and like I think just talking to people and having such a fast-paced environment and managing that stress, like all of that stuff, you just never know how that's going to help you in what you do in the future. And when I am like totally stressed out trying to do multiple projects at once, I think I'm tapping into that kind of like, okay, well, I just have to get through this day. I just have to keep moving forward. Let me focus on this one thing, you know, and organization wise, like how to manage all of that stuff. It's just
Totally.
fed by whatever experience you've had in the past, you know?
I think a lot of people are confused by that. Like I got a message recently being like, how do I be like you? Should I choose like electrical engineering or mechatronic engineering in college? And I'm like, I studied Spanish, dude. I studied all different languages. Uh, so then like, I got into this, through the maker spaces, but the languages totally help. And I'm trying to like use the that in order to like expand who we can talk to on Hackster as well, like, and like the processes of just knowing how you learn is so similar.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really important for people to know that it's a winding path to
Mm.
wherever it is you're going. And for a long time, I thought that I was kind of screwing it up because it just wasn't working out for me to have like the same job for many, many years. Like,
Yeah, right.
I would get like a job that was a good job. But I just was so unfulfilled and I was so unhappy, and it just wasn't like wasn't good for me. And
And
now I
sometimes you feel
know,
like
like,
you're stagnating in one thing.
yeah, yeah. And it may sound like, oh, that's not a big deal, but every day you're spending 8 hours
Yes.
doing this thing that is just like killing you inside. And it's just like, how did I eventually I ended up in a job where I wasn't using any of my creative skills at all in my work. And I was like, okay, now I feel like I screwed up my life because like, how can that be? How can I be doing something for 8 hours a day that's I don't find creative?
Yeah.
It just feels wrong to me. So I was like, it's gonna be hard, but I'm gonna have to take this leap and figure out how to get that in.
What do you do now? Are you a full-time like project maker, writer, and YouTuber, or what?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I ever since March of last year, I quit my full-time job and I've been doing this full time.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's hard. Like, I thought that I was gonna quit my job. So before then, I was working my job, 8 hours a day, and then I would come home and then I would work at night for
Yeah.
another like sometimes like 5 hours, 6 hours. Like, I was staying up really late every night just to get
Uh-huh.
everything done, and it didn't feel like a burden because I wanted to do it,
Yeah.
but I was definitely burning out, and I was like, this is not sustainable to do
Yeah.
these two things. So I was like, okay, we crunched the numbers. We're like, okay, it's time to quit the full-time job. And I thought, I'm going to quit my full-time job, and then I'm going to work that time on my projects, and then I'll be able to have my evenings and my weekends, and I'll like achieve a work-life balance. And it's totally not been the case. Like, the same amount of time just like on all my own stuff.
I still do the same thing too. I do this stuff during the day, and then like I go home and I'm like, oh, more robots, yeah.
You're right. But I guess, maybe that's just because I'm so interested in it, and
Yeah.
I'm just driven to do it now. And one day I'm hoping it'll pay the bills,
Mm.
but for now I'm just trying to find like what my what my identity is. Like, I'm still kind of figuring it out, like what I want to do, what all of these intersections that I have, what that means, and like how I can use that. So I'm still
Yeah.
exploring, but now I'm
Yeah.
exploring it full time.
It's a process. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So you have two talks at Maker Faire. Wait, two. One of them is this one with Jen's Tractor and Stephanie, and the other one is about your something in shortcuts, big projects in
Yeah.
shortcuts.
So I'm calling it Big Dreams and Shortcuts.
Yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. And it's going to be about my projects lately, and how I do that. Like, I think I think Big Dreams and Shortcuts really encapsulates like my process, because
Mhm.
I I can't start a project without a big dream. Like, I need that idea. And something my design professor told me way back in the day that just like really resonated with me is like, go big, like go way bigger, go too big, and you can always tone it down later.
Yeah.
Hard to inject that spark later on in the
Yeah.
process. You can always reel it back in, but bring the crazy at the beginning,
Mm.
and then ride it. So that's kind of what I do.
It's kind of like the right drunk edit sober of making.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't really know how to do a lot of the things that I want to do when I start.
Mm.
try not to let that phase me. Like, oh, I'll figure that out, or I'll learn that on the way, or I
And
want to
that's
learn
what
that
I
anyway.
do. You find something that.
Yeah, exactly. And then when, when I'm done with it, then I'm like, oh my God, I made that.
So I actually thought I was wrapping up, but I forgot. I have another question. Well, I just came up with it. I went to a thing called eTextile Spring Break in New York last year, and someone asked this question. I forget who it was, sadly, but they were like, "Okay, a bunch of us are into wearable tech and e-textiles, but we never actually wear, like, none of us were actually wearing any wearable tech."
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you wear any of the things that you make? Do you make anything functional? And is there anything of yours that you would actually wear like every day?
Yeah. So that's a super, I love that question because I think about that all the time.
It's so interesting.
Yeah. And my jacket I've been wearing out.
Uh-huh.
I've worn it to the perfume concert that I went to.
Yeah.
That was amazing, by the way.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, and I went to I wear it to like our tech meetups,
Uh-huh.
and I just like wear it because, and it's taken me a while to get to a point where I'm making things that um that I can kind of repurpose, or not repurpose, but like I can work into my daily
Yeah.
wardrobe. And I think part of that is like I do have these big dreams, so I do like make kind of things that don't feel like um but I'm kind of challenging myself to do that more because I'm really inspired by like science fiction and future, and like I want us to go there. Like I want
Yeah.
to end up evolving our clothes, and I want our clothes to work for us, you know?
Mhm.
Um, I tend to make a lot of things that light up, and I guess there's a limited function for that, but the other purpose of that is inspiration. So when I see someone out wearing something that lights up, whether it's like those Skechers shoes that light up, or something that they made that lights up,
Yeah.
I am like super inspired, and I go and I talk to that person. Um, so I'm trying to wear my things out more. I've
Yeah.
definitely gotten the most wear out of the jacket.
Yeah.
Um, and and actually at night, like especially where I live, it's really dark. So,
Uh-huh.
more the more light the better, you know.
Yeah. I guess that kind of ties back into what you were talking about before with how wearables really need to be designed around the body, kind of like spacesuits and stuff. I think that's definitely a part of why I don't wear a lot of my stuff, which is like the robot. Like that's definitely not practical, but like a lights kind of thing totally makes sense, or like something that's a wearable jacket.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I'm finding if you want to make wearable tech that is more practical,
Uh-huh.
I think it's more practical as an outer layer.
Right.
Thing that is not touching your skin. It's not, you don't need to clean it as often.
Right.
It's you've got a barrier between you and the piece. So
Hmm.
a jacket's kind of perfect. And then as long as it's really protected from the weather,
Hmm.
it's got really durable wiring. It's
Yeah.
kind of like it took me a while to get to that, but I've been thinking of wearable electronics as an outer layer for a while, and it's kind of making sense in this jacket. Like all of the wiring is internalized in the piece. So it's all in between the lining and the
Hmm.
outer layer. The outer layer is sealed. I've been drizzled on and it's fine. Everything
Sweet.
is, I can reach everything that I need to for maintenance. So it's definitely like, I want to do more work in that area, but I feel like I've made a little personal breakthrough, with that.
That's awesome. It's definitely, yeah, getting to the durability point is such a huge sort of roadblock for people, I think.
Yeah, it is. And I think we underestimate it too, because the human body, in the course of a day, your body is flexing and moving thousands of times. I mean,
Which is
when
like the chief
we have
enemy of electronics.
exactly, and I don't think we realize how much our bodies are subjected to every day, which is why I think like fitness trackers, I think are really interesting that we're not just tracking it from a health perspective, but just to be more aware of like what we're doing with our bodies all day from a wearable tech perspective. We need to know that like how much force is being subjected to these things that are on your body. And it's a lot more than, like, I think all the time, like, oh, this wearing connection, this will be fine. And 2 hours into the con, it like pops off. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I really underestimated that. So yeah, durability is
Strain
major.
relief and all those things. Like not
Mm-hmm.
even gonna go there.
I always say, like, the ability to turn it off is,
Yeah.
don't forget that. Like, it's so easy to just ignore, like, oh, I'll just take the battery out when I want to turn it off. But
Oh
then the
my
battery
God.
is, like,
This
buried
is
under
huge.
your
This is
shirt.
I flipped out about this in actually in Hackspace, I think. There was like a feature I did on the Gemma M0, and one of the things that I flipped out about was the fact that it had an off switch. I'm like, I don't want to have to pry coin cells out of my earrings because they're attached to me. I don't want to have to, like,
Yep.
detach those awful little lipo connectors with my
Oh my
fingernails every time I want to turn it off. Like,
never get those out.
I
Those
know, right? It seems like such a small thing, but it's so huge in terms of wearability.
It's huge, especially, like, the more you do wear wearable electronics out, the more you realize you want to turn it off all
Yeah.
the time. Like, when I walk into a room and it's dark, I'm blinding people. I want to be able
Yeah.
to, like, turn it off right away. And that happens at conventions. That happens when I'm out. Like, so I wore this jacket. The last time I wore it was to a Women in 3D meetup, which was really awesome.
Cool.
And we were just mingling and stuff at first, and so I had my lights on, but then some speakers were about to talk, and I was like, okay, I want to turn my lights off because I don't want to, like,
Be obnoxious or
be
whatever.
obnoxious during their talk. So I just reach in my pocket and turn it off, and I'm like, we always need to be able to turn these things off
Yeah.
at a moment's notice. You just want to be in control of your own wearable tech,
Mm-hmm. Baller. That is such a good insight. All right, I think that's all the questions I had. I'm really excited to come see your talks at Maker Faire. When are they? Do you have, like, the details handy?
I do.
Cool.
Yeah. So my talk with Jen and Stephanie, that's on Saturday morning at 10:30
Uh-huh.
on the DIY content creator stage. And then my other one is Big Dreams and Shortcuts is on Sunday at 12:30 on, oh my gosh, it's on the center stage.
Wow. Awesome. Cool. And we'll put the links to those in the description to this video so all you viewers can.
Oh, good. Please come, please come. I'm gonna bring my space. I'm gonna at least bring the helmet, and then I'm also gonna bring this jacket, and I think I'm gonna bring my Flappy Bird game controller.
Yes.
I would love it if someone would come up and try it. So
I bet you'll have a million volunteers for that.
that would be awesome.
I could see those helmets behind you on the shelf when you went to turn the Wi-Fi back on. It's so cool.
Oh yeah.
Is one of those a work in progress? There's two of them.
So one of them is the original helmet that I used. I'll show it to you. It's pretty interesting to see them side by side.
I have so many questions about all the things on there.
So this is so great because it's really light plastic. So this is the original helmet that I bought on Amazon. And it was only like $30.
That's styling.
It's not bad for a starter helmet. I looked around at a lot of helmets, and this is pretty much the only one out there that is full, like a full head helmet that's plastic, that has a nice visor. So the reason I went with this idea is I knew that I would have a lot of trouble if I tried to make my own visor, because I don't have like a vacuum forming machine or anything like that. And I wanted a big clear visor that would show the lights. So I found this one, and it's super light and it has a good shape. Like, I like this egg kind of shape, but I really didn't like these curly things. I really didn't like this. So I knew
it looks like a fake kind of sleeve mechanism.
Yeah, like fake fabric or something.
Yeah.
Weird. So I knew I wanted to cover that up. And then this opens, but mine doesn't open because I decided I wanted to decorate all of this. So then it wouldn't, I wouldn't be able to decorate until like back here if I wanted this to open all the way. So I decided I was gonna just like make mine closed. So that's the original, and this is what it ended up being.
Wow.
And it's funny, like this visor, it got kind of scratched up when I was working on it, but somehow in photographs, it still looks really shiny. And
Yeah, on the screen right now, it looks really shiny.
Good. Switch in here. Let's see. So
How did you? Oh wow, yeah.
So you can see the inside. So
Cool.
it's an itsy bitsy M0 from Adafruit, and there's the lipo.
Is that 2,000 milliamp hours or?
Yeah. And then I try to keep track of my batteries because I'm really paranoid about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've actually been trying to move towards USB power banks instead.
Yeah.
I just like how rugged
I use these for everything, partly just because we have a bunch of free ones from various events and stuff.
Yeah, I love when I get those for free. So yeah, and then this is all foam. This is laser cut foam.
Wow.
That was I engraved that in the Glowforge. And then this right here is it's just corrugated craft paper.
What?
Like I bought it from IKEA like ages ago, and I just painted it, and it just ends up looking like some kind of filter or something.
Yeah, and if it gets dinged up or anything, then it just looks like it's had some wear in space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I was doing all the weathering, and I was like trying to come up with a story for the weathering. And my thought was micrometeorites. So I did all these tiny little impacts.
That is so cool. Oh, I'm freaking out. Sweet. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I feel like I should let you go at this point. And is your what's your handle on Twitter and Instagram?
Oh yeah, so on Twitter I'm just Sophy Wong with a Y. And on Instagram I'm Sophy Wong Makes.
Great. We will put those links in the description as well. Thank you so much. Have an awesome rest of your Tuesday. This is so cool.
That was so fun to hang out. Thank you.
All right. I'll see you at Maker Faire.